All right, everyone. Cheers and salutations to all of you that are watching us right now. Hardlands Media, Sabby Sabs, Chicago Corner. We are live. Unfortunately, KRTD can't be live as they are hosting this, but due to YouTube's odd draconian rules, things are changing. So, to my fellow content creators, before we talk about our subject area, especially those hosts as well, please be careful what you do say. I hate saying these words, but we're going to have to tiptoe around eggshells until we understand the full implications of these new rules that YouTube has put upon its community. Now, my colleague Daniel has said this has been happening gradually, but then they decided to do the lump sum last night. So, to my colleagues in Convo Couch, RBN, Chicago Corner, Jimmy Dore, etc., keep your heads on a swivel. But with that being said, though, I want to thank all of you again for joining us. I hope no matter where you're at, please have a safe New Year's Eve. And what I want to share with my colleagues here who are joining me on this conversation about ballot initiatives, let's please respect each other's time as opinions. I don't want to tell you guys to rush with your thoughts, but I definitely want to get to the points. Obviously, we have my colleague Daniel Luepker, the co-host of Hardlands Media and founder of 99 Perspectives Studios. We got the wonderful and incredible Sabrina. Why am I stuttering? Sabrina Salvantini, who does great work for RBN and has been a strong voice in covering ballot initiatives. I wish my colleague Kier was here because obviously, Sabrina, you have been bringing the thunder. Also, I want to give a huge shout out to
Salvati. It's okay, kid.
Salvati.
People always get it wrong. People always get it wrong.
Today is not my day. All right. Don't worry. That's why I got next year.
We got to pick Kit to host this thing. He never screws it up.
Never, ever. And then we've got Joe Evans. He is working on strong ballot initiatives in the state of Idaho, as well as giving us a heads up of what could potentially happen to the state in regards to ballot initiatives. And we have Jason Call, who is talking about in regards to ballot initiatives for Medicare for All in the state of Washington. So obviously, I want to thank all of you so much for joining us. So first and foremost, let's begin discussing the significance of ballot initiatives. And Sabrina, I want to start off with you, and Daniel, you'll be the last person to give comment on this. Jason, you'll be after Sabrina, and then Joe, you'll be after Jason. Why should we start focusing on ballot initiatives? What is the fundamental importance of it? Because the American voter is mostly blinded by voting Democrat and Republican. Usually the presidential election cycle takes the whole cake. How do we really start, one, educating people about ballot initiatives and why are they important? Sabrina, we'll start off with you.
Yeah. So why are ballot initiatives important? Number one, if you are a progressive or a leftist, socialist, Marxist, whatever you want to call yourself, and you are really passionate about passing some of these progressive policies that, let's say, Bernie Sanders or members of the squad actually ran on, if you've been paying attention, they're not passing on the national level, right? But they are passing on the local level through ballot initiatives. So some of these states have the opportunity to actually implement a ballot measure, or they can amend their constitution. And I think what people may find surprising is that it's not just blue states like mine, Massachusetts. This is also happening in red states like South Dakota and Nebraska that are also passing progressive policies. So if you really want to get those policies passed, the faster way to do so has been implemented on the local level. It's just not getting through Congress, and it's not getting through the White House either. So I think that's the big reason. The other thing about that is, how do you educate people about it? Doing what we're doing right now. Like if you have a YouTube channel, educating people about the states that are BI states and what they've passed, what the results are, what the ballot measures are. You'll see that some of these states have a lot of ballot measures that are in common, like the $15 minimum wage, a woman's right to choose. So I just think it's important that we continue to educate people and push people to get out there and get involved in direct democracy. What we have right now on the national level is really not direct democracy. We are voting for a Congress politician or the president of the United States and hoping that they can push for legislation only to see it get shut down either in the House or the Senate, or the president doesn't want to sign off on it. Your best chance of getting direct democracy is through ballot initiatives. So you, the voters, actually can vote for those questions on your ballot, and you don't have to worry about dealing with a Congress or dealing with the presidents of the United States. Now, there's pros and cons that go along with ballot initiatives. Depending on which state you live in, the legislature can come in and overturn it. We actually haven't had that issue happen in Massachusetts, and we've been able to pass things like $15 minimum wage that was passed a couple years ago. We've been able to pass the millionaire tax, which just passed this year. This is also how we legalized marijuana in Massachusetts for people who are not aware. Some of these things you can get done by the people and not have to sit up here and rely on politicians to do it for you.
And I think Sabrina started off with a 1-2 punch about why we need to have ballot initiatives. Jason, your turn, and talking about a very important issue about Medicare for all. Let's hear your words.
Well, Sabby did a fantastic job of introducing the importance of ballot initiatives. I'm in Washington State. We were the first state in the country to legalize marijuana for recreational purposes, and we did it through the ballot initiative. I've worked on a number of ballot initiatives. If you're following the move to amend process, constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. We worked on that here in Washington, Initiative 735 in 2016. That passed, so Washington became the 18th state where the citizens are essentially directing our elected federal representatives to say we want you to move to overturn Citizens United. We increased our state minimum wage through ballot initiative that same year. And this year, and for the past few years, I've been working with a group called Whole Washington. I'm on the board of Whole Washington, and we are trying to get a single-payer healthcare system here in Washington State through the ballot initiative process. It is a tough road because progressive issues are typically not well funded. Now, the marijuana issue ended up being pretty well funded because that's a crossover issue that a lot of people were very interested in. A lot of people really don't understand healthcare issues too well. And so to go out to the public and start talking to them, not only about the need for single payer healthcare, but hey, let's do this in a way that challenges our state legislature. It's a heavy lift. So it takes funding. It takes a lot of volunteers. It takes a good organizational crew. I'm sad to say we're not going to make it. We didn't make our signatures again because the lift, we need 400,000 signatures to get something on the ballot here in Washington right now. And there's a couple of different ways that we can do it. I'll just wrap up quickly here. We can do an initiative to the people, but that shortens the window. So we only have 4 months to gather signatures, and we can do an initiative to the legislature. And as Sabby said, some legislatures can alter what goes to them as a ballot initiative. It gives us a longer time, 8 months to gather signatures rather than 4 months. But then the legislature can come in and do a hack and slash on what we present to them and put up their own and competing initiative. So it's complicated. It's a heavy lift, but it is the best way to do direct democracy, especially when we have corporate-owned legislatures in all states, Republican and Democrat. They're all bought off by industry, and to get the things that we need for the people, the best way to do it is through the people, and that's what a ballot initiative is all about.
That's fantastic. And obviously, I'm all on board with the idea of citizens choosing. Present them a question, present them a policy, and let the people vote on it. It's not connected with identity politics. It's not connected to the elephant or the donkey to keep on screwing us over. It's a question and a policy. And when you ask people the question, the people will turn out. Ballot initiatives are fundamentally important. Joe, the fight in Idaho, it's a matter of life and death because there's a possibility, and I dread to even think about or say it, and please correct and educate our audience if I've missed anything, but potentially Idaho could lose its status as a ballot initiative state. And what are you working on and fighting for in your state as well?
Okay, now that's the interesting thing about the state of Idaho is we don't risk losing the ballot initiative because that's constitutionally guaranteed right in the state of Idaho. And the citizens in general back that. What we run the risk of is our legislature deciding to set a barrier so high that the ballot initiative process is effectively impossible to achieve. And that was something they actually tried 2 years ago. And the Idaho State Supreme Court actually shut that effort down by our state legislatures. Now, Idaho, it's a very red state, very conservative. So an awful lot of the things that we want to do as far as policy from a progressive level actually has to go to the people. And as you've stated, you take it to the people will usually vote on it. So our first real trial in a couple of years was the Medicaid for All, or the Medicaid expansion, I should say. And that had 70% support across the state. And an organization here in Idaho called Reclaim Idaho was able to get that through. They tried again for education issues during COVID. They weren't as successful with that one, but they did it again. So we've proven that even with the barriers raised higher, as Jason pointed out, proper organization, volunteer effort, and a certain amount of funding will pretty much guarantee that anything can get on the ballot. Now, and that's one of the funny things about medical marijuana. For 10 years running, we've been trying. That's 5 cycles now that we've tried to get medical marijuana on the ballot in the state of Idaho. And for whatever reason, weren't able to get the right organizers in place to make sure that it happened in a timely fashion. Now, this year, we have Kind Idaho here in the state of Idaho working on medical marijuana legalization. We got the organization in place. We got the volunteers stepping up, and we're making things happen. And we're continuing to see an effort in ballot initiatives across the board. Okay. There's a group right now that's talking about ranked choice voting here in the state of Idaho.
Outstanding.
Another group talking about minimum wage. You know, regardless of how you feel about that, these are issues that people want to see brought to the people, you know, for the people to decide, because right now we got a bunch of Republicans that feel that they are the leaders of the republic and their wisdom should not be questioned. And of course, we all know how that ends up.
Unfortunately, that is all too true. And I will definitely be asking I'm all for ballot initiatives, but I will be asking a question that was being presented by corporate media later on in this conversation in regards to ballot initiatives, because it's quite insidious on how they are twisting it. Daniel, obviously, you've been with us as we've co-hosted the show with the wonderful, incredible Kira. She's done ballot initiatives. You've talked a lot about organization as well as, well, I think all of us, Sabrina, you included, we can all agree that the organization in Washington, D.C. has been an absolute failure. Your thoughts on ballot initiatives before we open up the conversation even further?
Yeah, so ballot initiatives in a lot of ways are like the co-ops of bills. It's getting everyone aligned on an issue that they agree with. And it's been very fortunate to see over the last couple years, like medical marijuana, legalization, number of other issues. It's crazy to think about ballot initiatives of being as effective as they are currently in America is really a commentary that it's actually more effective, easier, and takes less time to mobilize thousands of people, pay fees to get on the ballot, get all these signatures, than to just work through a bureaucracy, because we're very, very efficient at that in America right now. Ballot initiatives have really done some of the most groundbreaking changes that help people in America in the last couple decades. And that's sort of sad to me to some degree, because, you know, you'd expect in a country that claims it's a democracy that would already be kind of a natural consequence of the democracy, but obviously it's not. And so ballot initiatives are one of the few ways, probably the most direct way, that regular Americans can actually alter the landscape of the laws in their country. And it's very sad to see legislatures doing everything they can to try and minimize that power. I feel part of it is that they worry that they'll look really bad, that they can't get stuff done that regular people can. But I also think the real worry is they don't want this stuff to pass, because their job isn't to represent us. We're the rubber stamp that gets them in office, but we're not what keeps them in office. So I think that we need to keep these lifelines open. And we need, I think also, to everyone else said, I think we need to shout from the rooftops a little more about the success that we have had countrywide, because Congress maybe in a year names 2 duck ponds on federal land somewhere. And meanwhile, regular citizens are actually getting things passed. I really think that in general, we should be cheering and celebrating the track record of ballot initiatives that have been accomplished. I think we should do it more than we have, because legislatures generally aren't able to hold a candle to what a lot of the ballot initiative states have been able to do. And I think we really should push to the American people that we got it.
Now, I would be incorrect if I did not acknowledge the success of ballot initiatives. So first and foremost, paging Roger Meadows. If you're somewhere in the background, Sabrina knows who I'm talking about. Roger Meadows definitely got us on board for ballot initiatives and the good that they can do. So this one's mostly directed at Sabrina, and anyone else wants to add in their commentary, please do so. But Sabrina, obviously, Kira was talking about what was on the ballot initiatives, but you've gone a step further and talked about the success of ballot initiatives, especially on your show, most notably the choice that happened in Kentucky, a solid red state, when voters were asked, hey, women's reproductive rights, keep it? Yes, no, throw it away. People said, let's keep it. And that caused a backlash. What other ballot initiatives stood out to you as a success? And if you could elaborate a little bit more about what happened in Kentucky, I think everyone would really like to get a refresher course on really the success of ballot initiatives and what stood out for you again.
The big one is the woman's right to choose. That's been a big one for me that really stood out. I think the situation that happened in Kentucky there was that, again, when you leave it up to the voters will let you know, regardless of the political party, the majority feel that we should just keep it this way. Women should have that right to choose, right? So I think the difference is with ballot initiatives and just voting for a politician, these questions are not connected to a politician, therefore they're not connected to a political party. So when you give voters just the question on the ballot, they're just focused on that and they're not focused on, well, which party is this a part of, especially for people who are party loyalists and continue to back their party. So that's the significance of it. I think some of the ones that have come through, because we're going through each state every night. Some states we had to split into two parts because they had so many. Like I think it was Arizona, Alabama,
California too. California had a
God.
lot.
Yes, Alabama, California has a lot. I know next week I'm doing Colorado. I'm going to have to split that into 2 nights as well because they had a lot of them. Some of the ones that are coming through, gambling is a big one. Sports betting that came through in California. There was 2 different questions about gambling in California that came through. That's one of the ones. Obviously, the woman's right to choose is a big one. Recreational marijuana was on the ballot in I think 4 different states. I know it passed in Missouri. It didn't pass in 2 others, I believe. I have to go back and check. So that was another big one. Medicaid expansion, that one passed in South Dakota. $15 minimum wage passed in Nebraska. In Massachusetts, I told you about the millionaire's tax. One of the other ones that passed, and this one was really close, was dental insurance. So for people who have to meet like that certain threshold of their deductible, and then maybe they don't use all of their benefit and then they lose it at the end of the year if they don't use it, that one passed by like 80% here, that people should be able to get that money back if it's not used, and they shouldn't be punished for that as well. So, and there were a couple others, but there's so many states that have put so many different things on the ballot. I want to remind people also, a state like Florida, they passed $15 minimum wage last time in 2020. So it's really important that we do focus more on these particular issues. Some of these are social issues, some of them are economic issues, but it seems like so far when it comes to the economic issues, those tend to pass. I don't understand the states that didn't legalize recreational marijuana. That one is weird to me because it's a win for the state in reference to revenue. We have made a lot of money in Massachusetts off of legalizing marijuana, especially when we created the cannabis shops as well. So it's a lot of money because they tax it. So that's more money that comes into the state. And now, because they've made so much money off of it, they've actually gone back and announced we are now decreasing the prices because it's been so profitable. So I think that if you live in a state that is not a BI state, one of the things Roger and I are going to talk about as well is how to make your state a BI state. What can you do to pass those kind of measures? Because the reality is all of the states are not BI states. But the idea is that when these policies pass in a BI state, it actually puts pressure on the states that are around them. That happens a lot here in New England. When we pass something in Massachusetts, it puts pressure on Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Connecticut, and it trickles down to New York. So I think that I'm a big fan, obviously, of ballot initiatives. One of the ones I would urge people to try to get on the ballot is ranked choice voting. Now, that did not pass here in Massachusetts in 2020 because a lot of people were confused about the question. And if you're not paying attention to politics as much as we are, I probably would have been confused by the question as well. It was the way it was worded, confused people. But ranked choice voting is a big one. I know Nevada just passed that as well. For those of you that really want to push third party and third party candidates and independent candidates, you really want to try to get ranked choice voting on the ballot in your state if you can.
Again, that is such fantastic information to share and for people to be educated on. Because, again, folks, ballot initiatives, and I say this as someone who wants to see more of it, it's a way in which you, the voter, are presented with a policy and you decide it. In Illinois, it was almost unheard of to hear a governor candidate in 2018 talking about the legalization of cannabis, but yet all of them were saying they'd sign it. And there was a ballot initiative in that midterm election cycle whereby at the end of beginning of 2021, not 2021, 2020, that they were going to legalize cannabis for recreational use in the state of Illinois, which is groundbreaking because, again, who would ever think that that question would be accepted? But voters voted on it. And I think it's the great experiment. And Sabrina, if no one's following Sabrina's channel on ballot initiatives, please do so, because we have to start educating more voters. I understand people are burnt out by voting. I get it. I'm not going to tell people to get excited or shame people to vote. But if you live in a ballot initiative state, I'm not asking you to vote for a politician. I'm not asking you to join a party. But I will ask you to exercise your right, which is an absolute privilege now in this country. If you live in a ballot initiative state, know what the ballot initiatives are and vote for those initiatives or vote against them if they're bad and they're going to harm people, because your presence is needed as they are the great laboratory of how we can maybe undo this neoliberal nightmare that we are in.
Can I
Go ahead,
jump
Daniel.
in real quick? So I want to really, Sabby said something I think is very, very important that I think we really need to expand more, because not all people live in ballot initiative states. And I think there are still ways, based on what Sabby said, that actually allow you, even if you're not in that, to really take advantage of states that are next to you. So like we're talking about Massachusetts passing stuff, that puts pressure. Like if every state around you it's marijuana is illegal, no one really wants to do anything about it. But all of a sudden, if the state next to you is suddenly making millions of dollars off of the taxing, the amount they're spending to try and fight the war on drugs is lower, all of a sudden you've now actually applied pressure through a ballot initiative to a state that doesn't even have it. So if you're not in a ballot initiative state, look to the states bordering you and go help them out.
Two things I want to go ahead. I didn't mean to cut off. Who was going to speak?
Oh, I was going to say, and thinking about Joe's position in Idaho, Idaho borders Oregon and Washington, and we are both very marijuana friendly. And anybody from Boise who wanted to get some marijuana wouldn't have to go very far. And it doesn't make sense for a state like Idaho to give up that revenue, knowing that anybody in Idaho could take a quick day trip and get all the weed they wanted just by crossing the state line. The other thing I wanted to say is we also have to be cautious about ballot initiatives, because here in Washington state, we have conservatives who want to run ballot initiatives, and ballot initiatives can actually do damage. There's a guy in Washington state called Tim Eyman. He's notorious here as a conservative for running conservative ballot initiatives, trying to strike down government spending, trying to strike down tax increases. Now, regardless of how you feel about tax increases, he managed to get a ballot initiative passed that would have required a 2/3 voter approval for any tax increase. Now, that is a little bit, and that included a repeal of a tax break counted as a tax increase. So that's very corporate friendly. But to the voters, oh yeah, I mean, we don't want to have our taxes raised. A 2/3 bar for raising taxes, even in the state legislature, that is, that's kind of ridiculous, and it had the potential to really hamstring things like education funding. transportation department funding. And so it passed, and then it was overturned as unconstitutional, which was a good thing. But my point is, there are a lot of good things that we can tackle with ballot initiatives. We also have to be careful about some ballot initiatives that sound like they might be good, but in the end are going to be destructive to progressive values.
Now, there's two things I want to do because obviously I want to continue the conversation, but I'd be wrong if I did not acknowledge this. First, Roger Meadows had tipped at least $10 right now, and Roger Meadows is a treasure trove of information. If you're not following him on Twitter, please do so. Louis Rossman left New York State because of what Hochul just did. I hope he moved to a congressional ballot initiative state, preferably one that allows voters to amend their state constitution. And then he also went on to write, and let me be sure to pull this up here as well, Arkansas, Idaho, Washington, Wyoming, Utah, I believe, ME, it's skipping me. Maine. Thank you.
It
Thank
was
you.
Alaska, not Arkansas.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Don't, okay. Sorry. I stand corrected. Don't allow, CBI for amendments, only law, but they use voter referendum to repeal, the repeal of their initiatives when government repeals theirs. Thank you again, Roger Meadows. And also we did get a chat from Johnny Askham, who says Minnesota's not a ballot initiative state. It takes a constitutional amendment to change that. So let's actually talk about two things here real quick. And then I want to start, first with Sabrina. How do we get states that are non-ballot initiative to become ballot initiative states? How do we get there? And then with starting off with Joe and then with Jason, when did you decide to capitalize on a ballot initiative and start really promoting it? Because again, it takes a lot of courage, especially in this nightmare that we call America and this neoliberalism maze that we're in, to actually step up and bring in change. So Sabrina, how do we turn non-ballot initiative states into ballot initiative states? If, of course, obviously the process is difficult, but how do we get there?
Yeah, there's a process you have to go through for that. Me and Roger are going to go through that and then share that information with people. I haven't had a chance to go through that yet.
Okay.
But in reference to constitutional amendment, those states that Roger mentioned, there's other ones too. Yes, they can go in and change their constitutional amendment. In fact, some of the states that we've gone through, that's what they did with those ballot measures. Like they went in and said, we want to amend a piece of our constitution. And so I think that California is one of the ones where they could do both. They can amend the Constitution or they can do the ballot initiative option. They can put it before the voters, or the legislator can come forward and say, we're going to change this piece of our Constitution. So that's why California is a big one for me, because they have that option to do both. And you have indirect states and you have direct states. My state, believe it or not, is actually one of the more difficult ones to get ballot measures on the ballot. But look at all the things that we've managed to pass. And I'm in one of the more difficult states to do so. I think when we talk about the funding, because this is a big issue that stops some of these initiatives from being passed, I think it is very important that we address the issue of public banks. So one of the big one that comes around or keeps coming around to me is we cannot do single payer healthcare through the states because the federal government will come in and they'll shut it down because of the fact that you still have to get the funding from the federal government. You can't get it through the states. So one of the ways around that is by having a public bank. So we should be looking at a state like North Dakota that has the Bank of North Dakota, and they have been able to use that public bank to get things passed. So people in North Dakota don't have to sit back and say, well, this sounds like a good idea, but how are we going to pass that? We don't have the money. They don't have to worry about that because they have a public bank. So that's another option I think that people should be trying to organize around, to get a public bank on the ballot. I would really like to get something going for that in Massachusetts starting in January, for us to try to get that initiative happening. Because if we had a public bank here, just think about all the other things that we could pass. The other thing that you could do, if you're not a BI state, is you need to have activist groups put pressure on the state house. So one of the legislations that we're known for passing here in Massachusetts is gay marriage, right? That actually was not a ballot initiative. For people who are not aware, the way that passed is that the activist group GLAAD actually put pressure on the Superior Court in Massachusetts. And so they sued them because they were not allowing LGBTQ people to get married. So when they were hit with that pressure from the activist group on the outside, it was easier for the state just to say, you know what, let's just make it so that LGBTQ people can get married here too. That's actually how That passed in Massachusetts. So for people who are activists and organizing on the ground, but you don't have that BI option, you need to gather people to organize and put pressure on the state house, the legislature. And it is also important that you understand you need to have transparency from your state house as well. There's an organization here in Massachusetts called Act on Mass. I've had them on before. That's their job. That's what they do. They basically tell the residents of Massachusetts the pieces that the state house is leaving out. So, for example, and I want to go into a tangent, but for example, this idea that a bill has been sent to a study. There is no study being done. Basically, that's what happens when a bill is sent to a space where it is basically brought there to die. So a lot of people don't understand that. So when they hear their legislators say, oh, yes, we considered that bill for single payer, we actually sent that to a study to be reviewed. It's not being reviewed. That means it is basically dead. And they're not going to tell you that. But when you have a group like Act on Mass that is going to give you that transparency that your legislators in the state house are leaving out, that piece is key. So what I would really like to see are different chapters of Act on Mass, Act on California, Act on Illinois, different chapters throughout the country that are doing the same thing that those organizers are doing here.
That's fantastic. All right, now to you two gentlemen. Joe, starting off with you. How did you find out about your ability to want to organize around a ballot initiative, and overall, what made you decide to step up and fight for your cause? And then Jason, obviously, will have you, and Daniel, if you have any commentary, I would like to have you at the end. So Joe, shoot away.
Well, a lot of this goes back to what Sabby was talking about. The fact that bills go into certain drawers in our state legislatures to die, and realizing that there is still the citizens initiative capability that can go in. And if it doesn't actually pass, it at least creates the opportunity to force action inside of our legislative bodies. Now, this last year, Reclaim Idaho did the action where they were looking at school funding and school education. They managed to get it on the initiative. They qualified for the ballot in November. And that was enough pressure that the legislature and the governor, before it even went to the ballot, said, okay, we'll pass it. We'll make it happen. So we didn't even need to take it to the ballot for the decision. This is one of those things. And I want to bring up what Rogers mentioned here earlier, about the idea that legislators can go in and veto a citizen's initiative. Idaho happens to be one of those. We could very well get any one of these bills passed on the ballot. And, January, when the new legislator meets, they could vote to repeal it. It is one of the reasons why it's so important that we as citizens, activists, actionists here in the state of Idaho need to pick and choose our ballot initiatives for the quality and their ability in order to get the support, from the entire population. Yeah, Roger, the feasibility study and the business plan. Yeah, it's a joke. It goes into a drawer, it disappears. And that's one of the things we saw with medical marijuana. It's what we saw with education. The idea, big one right now in the state of Idaho is, well, across the nation, is the Defend the Guard initiative. Literally a state level anti-war initiative that says the federal government can't conscript National Guardsmen to go fight, these unconstitutional wars around the globe.
Thank you. I mean, we can't be having that. Yep.
Right. But there are initiatives across the states right now that are being submitted, being worked in order to make sure that that option is stripped from the federal government when it comes to, long-term wars. While I was deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq, it was a continuation of, National Guard units, National Air Guard going in and replacing troops on the ground. These are the things that citizens initiatives are addressing all across the United States. Yep. Medical marijuana for post-traumatic stress injury. And our legislators are paid to make sure that things like this don't pass, because the war machine, PharmaCorp, big oil, big ag in the state of Idaho has significant influence on whether or not a lot of these things will be passed in the legislature. Mm-hmm. And this makes each one of these issues a single choice issue for the citizens. You no longer have to vote for the candidate that's going to get the most of your issues, you're able to come in and say, no, these are my 5 issues. These 5 issues are going to go on the ballot, and I'm going to vote yes on these issues because they're important to me. And I don't care who my legislature is, because I know he'll never vote for them.
Right on. Jason, obviously your introduction to ballot initiatives, why is it important to you? And obviously you're fighting for Medicare for all at least the state level. Let's also enlighten that. And also, Joe, too, when Jason's done, I would like both of you to at least promote where people can find you guys online. So at least if they can't even help you in your state, they can at least tell other people like, hey, go here because they're doing some good work.
So, well, I mean, I've been involved in, as a volunteer and a board member and on ballot initiative efforts, a number of them since 2012 when we got the recreational marijuana pill passed here, I-502. We were lucky enough in Washington State to have our state legislature pass medical marijuana back in 2000. So, it wasn't a terribly huge lift for recreational marijuana. We had to go and get the signatures, but there was a lot of effort, a lot of people very enthusiastic about the prospect of doing it. Same thing with other ballot initiatives. We had, as I mentioned before, a minimum wage ballot initiative that passed pretty readily. People were willing to sign that. The single payer thing, I don't want to get into any sort of discussion about whether single payer can work on a state level, but we've got a very good bill, and I wanted to really kind of mention that one of the things that the Washington State Legislature did is in 2018, they did a study about what would be the best healthcare system for Washington State. And, they had 3 different options, and the panel that decided this actually said single payer is going to be good for our state. It's the most efficient, most effective way to deliver healthcare services. And that came from a state legislature study. And then the state legislature did absolutely nothing about it. And so we have picked up the initiative process. We ran one in 2018. We only got 108,000 signatures on our first run. We tried it again in 2020. We got knocked down by COVID. It was a very difficult time to try and get out to the public and gather signatures. And so we stopped our effort. We just sort of voluntarily said, this is not good for the public for us to be out gathering signatures for this. And in this last run, we're not going to make it. But I think the state legislature kind of saw what was coming with our efforts. And that we are going to get there at some point. And so what they did, as I believe a delay tactic, was they passed a bill last year that was essentially a commission. They said, we're going to take another 3 years. And so they have a deadline of 2025 to see if they can come up with a way that single payer could work. Well, they already know our bill our funding has been accepted. Like, it's the State Department of Revenue has looked at our funding mechanisms and said, yeah, this will work. It doesn't involve any real tax increases. And so they did this bill that ended up passing through the state legislature that essentially, if we are going to do this by the legislative process, it is delayed at least 3 years. And then we have no guarantee that they're actually going to come up with a plan to do anything. And so that's why we think that it's important to say, quit jacking around. We know you're trying to put us off. I've done the research on our health committees in Washington State Legislature, and they are all funded by pharma and the hospital industry and other medical industries. So we think it's still important. We are going to be recycling this thing for next year to see if we can get back out in the public and get these signatures to get this thing up in front of the people. We think the people will support single payer healthcare if they are given the option to do so.
Yeah, and I just want to add really quick too, to show you how local actions can actually have an effect on the national level. When you look at something like Obamacare, that actually came from Massachusetts. There was Romney Care. And so that was something that was implemented here on the local level, and then it was taken to the national level.
Right. So real quick to Jason and Joe, I would like both of you to at least share, not only here in the live stream, but maybe in the chats as well, links to where people can find your organization so that they could share it on social media and spread the word. Because, again, one of the problems with ballot initiatives is that people don't know how great they are. So starting with you, Jason, and then with you, Joe, where can people find your group online and social media so we could share it? Because more eyes on means more people talking about it, more people wanting to do more to step up.
Yeah, absolutely. So the organization that I'm on the board of is called Whole Washington, WHOLE Washington, and we have our entire bill there. We have a bunch of frequently asked questions that people can go and look. Is this going to work? Is this not going to work? We had our study done, a fiscal study done by Gerald Friedman, who's the same guy who did the fiscal study on Medicare for All. We actually hired him to do fiscal analysis on our bill. You can read a short summary of the bill. You can read the full 63 pages of text if you want to. Mm-hmm. But everything is there. Email us if you've got any questions. There's contact if you want to volunteer. Like I said, we have failed this year because the deadline was yesterday and we didn't get our 400,000 signatures. It's actually about 320,000, but we overshoot it by a certain percentage because signatures are going to get challenged. They're going to get struck down for this, that, the other reason. So we try and overshoot by like 20%. So please get in touch with us, wholewashington.org. And, read, the website is fantastic. Our game plan is fantastic. We just need funding and more volunteers.
Fantastic work. All right. And then Joe, you as well. I'm sorry, Joe, but right now you're muted, my friend.
Okay. Yeah. My organization that I'm working for right now is Kind Idaho. Mm-hmm. And you can find us at kindidaho.org. On that page, you got links to all of our social media, our Instagram account, Twitter, Facebook, our Facebook groups, and our Discord server. So you can get involved with us, get involved with the organization, get the petitions mailed to you so you can get them signed, get them turned back in. And one of the things I want to bring back up, aside from the work I do from Kind Idaho and other organizations that are focused on citizens initiatives like Reclaim and others, is Sabby brought up the point of the central banks, mm-hmm. Or the departure from the central bank. The Federal Reserve right now represents a monopoly on the way currency is handled. And whether you subscribe to modern monetary theory or some other form, we understand that fiat currency being held by the federal government is holding the states hostage. It's holding communities hostage. Mm-hmm. And the idea that we can develop state level banks, community level banks that operate so that we can get out from underneath the control of the federal government and the centralization of power. These are things that give states options.
Right. And I think that's something that we need to start sharing. So please, everyone, here's the thing I also want to do as an invite here for both Joe and Jason. I would like both of you to be on my show. Each of you get an individual segment. Hopefully we get that scheduled for next week or something like that, because obviously we're running short on time, and this is not fair because as Daniel knows, I work on a list of questions and I'm realizing, oh no, I don't have all my stuff answered. And Daniel knows firsthand because I work on a lot of this paperwork and so much more, but that's a story for another day. But I want to open this floor up while we still have, because I want to at least promote people where people can find you guys online. And real quick, Sabrina, where can people find you on social media? And then I'll present the panel with my last question. And overall, I think everyone will have different opinions, but Sabrina, where can people find you online as well, so that way they can support your work? You're muted. There you go.
Yeah, so you guys can find me here on YouTube. My channel name is Sabby Sabs, or you can find me on Revolutionary Blackout Network, also on YouTube and Rockfin and Rumble. And you can find me on Twitter at Sabby Sabs 2.
All right, fantastic. So now here is the final question for the panel.
Can I say one thing before? One thing I want to know. I noticed we're streaming on 3 different platforms. Streaming on Sabby Sabs, Hardlands Media, and Chicago Corner. I would love it if behind the scenes, if we can get a links to all 3. If everyone that's watching any of the videos can jump over to another channel that you're not subscribed to and give it a quick subscribe.
Yes.
We're all working together. The more all of us rise together, the more powerful we all are.
Yes, because the YouTube censorship is all too real, but that's a conversation for another day. Thank you, Daniel, for that. Obviously, Joe and Jason, looking forward to having you on the show as well, because I want to make that happen. So I'm going to present this last question. This is more opinionative. I think we all have your own answers. I might come off as a bad guy here, and I'm going to word this question carefully due to YouTube's policies. Obviously, at the federal level, our politicians are not popular. Cockroaches are more popular than our elected officials. Certain adult oriented activities that might prohibit fun later on are more popular than Congress. See what I did there, YouTube? And obviously, when it comes down to it, ballot initiatives are, at least at the state level, are showing the American people, or those that are paying attention, that at the state level, things could get done, and we don't really need those jagoffs in Washington, D.C. However, there has been this ongoing prevailing threat towards states' rights, especially towards ballot initiatives. None other than from what we saw recently in 2017 from the Keebler elf, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, born on December 24th, 1946, where he was indicating on going on a crusade of his own to go against cannabis and states that have legalized cannabis for either recreational, medical use, or for both. So is the future, our state rights potentially, and ballot initiative rights, and it doesn't have to be about cannabis, but for abortion rights, etc., Medicare for all at the state level, are state rights at risk of being trampled on by the federal government, by overzealous people like Jeff Sessions, by the ignorant people in the Democratic and Republican establishment in Washington, D.C.? Are we at risk of that? Sabrina, I want to start off with you, and Daniel, you'll have the closing notes. Jason, you'll follow after Sabrina. Joe, you'll be after Jason.
Yes, they are. They're catching on to what's happening here. They're catching on to these wins, particularly the ballot initiatives that happened this November. They're catching on to the fact that, wait a minute, we got red states saying it's okay for a woman's right to choose. So this is why I'm telling you guys, you need to act now. If you want to have a ballot initiative in your state for 2024, you need to start organizing in January of 2023 to get those things up and going. And I really, really press and want to stress again to people, two of the ones I think you should heavily focus on is ranked choice voting and public banks.
All right. Jason.
I don't think that the ballot initiative process in Washington State is under any particular threat. We've had a great success here in Washington State on a number of areas, and I think that there would be really a public outcry if the federal government overstepped in any way on our ballot initiative process. But I wanted to comment on the Jeff Sessions thing, because if you remember, it was kind of amazing that John Boner, who was the Speaker of the House for however many years and was an anti-marijuana crusader in the House. When he retired from the House, he went to work for a marijuana lobbying group. So these Republicans are so hypocritical on cannabis issues. It's kind of crazy. I think we're safe here in Washington State. I don't know about other places in the country. Somebody said something about Mississippi. If they could expand on that, that would be fantastic, because that was the first that I had heard of it.
Yeah,
Mississippi
Sabrina,
lost theirs. Mississippi
Yeah,
lost theirs. Yeah. We're safe here in Massachusetts too, but yeah, Mississippi was one of the states that did lose theirs.
Okay.
And what was the process for them losing that? How did that actually happen?
It revolved through like a congressional, if I remember correctly, a constitutional amendment where they didn't have enough districts or something like that. I have to go back through my notes, but yeah, they were one of the ones that lost it. So just be careful if you're one of those states where you're kind of on the edge there.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I remember it's one of those technicalities like, oh, you have to, the 20 districts get to vote on the ballot initiative, and they're like, well, we only have 19, so we can't do it anymore.
Right. I want to hand it over to Joe so he has time. I want to get your thoughts on my previous question. Are state rights and ballot initiatives at risk from the federal government?
Oh, yeah, one of the things, I love this question, Kit, because ultimately we don't want state rights. Okay. When we talk state rights, we're talking about the Confederacy. That's what the states wanted to do as states. Okay, what we're talking about is citizens' rights and the rules that the states are supposed to follow and protect citizens' issues.
Well done.
The citizens' rights. Okay. Now, that is a problem everywhere. And it's not just whether or not the federal government does it. Here in Idaho, we're continually threatened by our local government, our state government, and in some cases, even right down to the county and the city as to whether or not we're able to participate in certain rights. It's a felony for 3 ounces of marijuana in the state of Idaho. It's a felony if you get caught with 2 edible chocolate candy bars. Okay. That's where we're at. You can go to prison for 10 years for this. Okay, this is a violation of our rights. This is a violation of medical choice, violation of bodily autonomy. Okay, so you can't just limit it to what the federal government can and can't do, because the Supreme Court this last year gave states back the right to choose issues. And many of those states chose to take away rights that we had enjoyed for a very long time. Okay, now we're back to the situation where states are telling us there are limits to our bodily autonomy. There are limits to our reproductive choice. There are limits to our medical choice, our medical autonomy. So we can't get stuck in this federal versus state versus. We need to be able to fight at every level in order to retain our inherent rights. Not the one, because the Constitution, we understand the Constitution isn't going to protect squat. Okay. Mm-hmm. We need to take and do our due diligence to protect our rights as citizens and state residents from the authority, from the self-appointed authorities that find themselves governing our states and our federal government.
And
so don't get caught in that whole paradigm of, well, the Fed's bad, state's good. No, because they're all bad. They're all bad, man.
Right on. And as with a final note, none other from my colleague, Daniel Luepker, I guess you have the final word. Are we at risk of losing ballot initiatives and citizen rights? Because I'm not going to take that. Is it state rights? I'm going to take that from you, Joe. Citizen rights. Daniel, what's the closing remarks?
We're always at risk of everything being lost. I think the bigger question I would ask is not, is it a risk of being lost? It's, what is the best path we can take to minimize that risk? And I think that I'm going to go back to what I said earlier in the stream. All of us here, or everyone watching in chat, we get the value of ballot initiatives. We understand why they're important. We understand that they're effective. We understand that we've gotten a lot of very good stuff passed, or we've at least forced legislatures to adapt things because of the ballot initiative threat to them. I think a big thing that all people watching this and all of us can very easily do in our day-to-day lives is get other people that are sick of the regular political process to become aware of this process. Because I do think that we overestimate how many people are even aware of ballot initiatives being a thing, let alone being a useful thing. I think we have to act as PR for even the idea of ballot initiatives far more than we do. And to people especially that aren't, we talk to people all the time. I'm sure all of you have the same story I'm about to say. I know someone that they just hate politics. They don't want, they're like, stop talking about it. It's not my thing. Nothing good ever happens. And I feel like I don't have enough good stories to tell people. We can always talk about ballot initiatives. And I think every American, every citizen would agree that having participation in the prosperity of their own rights, probably a good thing, especially with the track record it has.
That's right. And so I want to, again, maybe open this floor up to everyone watching either on Sabrina's YouTube channel, Hardlands Media, Chicago Corner, and also KRTD Media is live streaming on Rockfin. With my question that I asked all with this wonderful panel, and again, I wish I had more time. Type 1, if you think, obviously, maybe, potentially, citizen rights, ballot initiatives are at risk from the federal government. Type 2, if you don't think it's at risk, and give us your feedback, your thoughts, your reasons why. Let's have democracy in the chat. I know, controversial statement. What is democracy? I haven't seen it in a while. So as we are wrapping things up, first of all, if you're not following the great work that Sabrina's doing, not only on her YouTube channel, but on RBN, what's the matter with you? Please go ahead and subscribe to their work. I mean, you got a lot of great activism stories. You got a lot of great investigative reporting stories and commentary and so much more. Sabrina, it's always a real privilege to have you on and actually work with you. So thank you again for taking time out of your New Year's Eve to be here with us. Jason, Joe, Obviously, right off the bat, I need to have you on my show next week. So obviously, I'm going to be yelling at Shane to give me your contact information so we can get that right away. So there we go. And obviously, a shout out to Daniel Luepker. For those of you who don't know, he has really been working hard behind the scenes with my colleague Faze to make Heartlands Media happen and do so much more. So again, to all of you and everyone watching, thank you so much. And Roger Meadows, I wish this was a 2-hour panel because I barely touched all the other questions I'm looking at, and I'm furious. Curses upon you, Shane. I will yell at you later. So
can I just add something really quick?
Go ahead.
Just really quick for people. The fact that the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade and said leave it up to the states, that should have been a big red flag for people that you need to pay more attention to local politics.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Because how is it that the Democratic Party that ran on women's reproductive rights and so much more, they get leaked a memo a month and a half. There is no excuse for them to codify Roe v. Wade, to miss out on that opportunity. But what did they do? They fundraise off it, just like all Democratic and Republican politicians do. All these issues, they fundraise off it. They live in an environment of fear. So that's why we got to look at ballot initiatives, because we got to start building movements and organizations that are not connected to Washington, D.C., folks. You don't owe these politicians a vote. You don't owe them any favors. You don't owe them any niceties. They got gold-plated health care, a 6-figure salary, and other wonderful social benefits. They dance and drink because they believe you are weak. The politicians in Washington, D.C., from your friend Bernie to Turtle Boy Mitch McConnell and all the rest, they don't like you. They don't think about you. And this one should really tick you off for 2023. They don't respect you. If they did, we would not be in this neoliberal nightmare that we are in. Hashtag ballot initiatives are key.
And I want to just add one little thing at the end as well. As a reminder to everyone, politics is how humans organize power. The only roles that you can have in the process are designing the menu or being on it.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. I think as we are waiting for our next guest to show up, I do want to hype up this one panel that the 2 panels I'll be working on. First of all, one on third parties, and the second one, the final one that I'll be hosting. Thank you so much to the crew at KRTD Media. I'll be talking about the failures of the Federation and of Star Trek. So there you go. Yes, I am saying that the Federation, Gene Roddenberry's vision, is false. And if we had more time, I'd talk about how Emperor Palpatine was correct. There we go.
Oh, kid. Oh, I'm going to get you on that one.
Palpatine did nothing wrong. He did nothing wrong.
Oh.
Nothing wrong. No, Palpatine was right the whole time. Palpatine was right.
That's right up there with saying McCarthy did nothing wrong.
No, I got my reasons. I have my reasons about the Federation and of Emperor Palpatine and the Republic and the Resistance and Skywalker. So there you go. All right. And obviously, the Shane is saying on the sidelines that they are ready when I am ready. So obviously, Joe, Jason, I want to have you on the show. Sabrina, more than happy to be on your show and have you be on our show as well. You guys are doing great work. To all 3 of you, please have a safe New Year's Eve. And let's get started now with the second panel of the day.
Thanks. I'll be back later, guys. Bye.
A good one, Sabby.